Hello, and welcome to Morgan Latif Presents Coaching You Through Crisis. I'm Sam Latif, co-founder and director of Morgan Latif and your host. And this week coming to you from slightly different settings for the last two episodes of our series. This week, my guest is Michael Keating. Michael's an international human relations expert. He, for the last 6 years, have been a leadership coach, advising both organizations and individuals on leadership mentoring and organizational culture analysis and development. Prior to that, he has an extensive career as a senior HR leader, working for some of the largest industrial companies in the world, heading up their EMEA teams. And prior to that, always having a strong leniency to helping understand how people connect and exchange ideas. And this week, that's actually one of the topics that we are covering. He brings a real passion for human relations, and particularly in the context of what we've now just been through with the COVID crisis. We talked through a number of different themes, and his recommendation for leaders moving forward on how the perspectives, how the landscape has completely changed. So I found it a really interesting, a really engaging conversation. So hopefully you find it of value, and why don't we jump into the conversation. Good afternoon, Michael. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for your invite. I'm very happy to be here with you.
Well, look, I already mentioned it in the intro. You have this extensive experience as an HR leader. You've been a coach for some time. I know my business partner obviously knows you well from that time. But firstly and foremost, I always like to understand the origin story. You know, you've had quite an interesting corporate career, but it was interesting to understand those motivations. What really, brought you to the point where you wanted to dedicate yourself to being a leadership coach and executive coach?
Yeah, actually, my story begins way back when I was a teenager.
Oh, wow.
I was playing sports and I was in basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an experience where somebody from the United States, a big black guy, came and coached our team to really learn sort of different ways of playing basketball in Ireland. Okay. And this was such an event for me, which opened my eyes and the power of seeing good practices from other countries. Yeah, because I'd never met somebody from another country before, of another color particularly, and what that did to us as a team and our capability. And so I started actually coaching then myself, younger players, because I was then like 16, 17, and I started coaching people who were 12, 13 and having some successes, and I saw the power of coaching. Yeah. So I've been in the human relations coaching business all my life, you could say.
Wow. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously an early start for you as well. So it's probably, the destiny, should we say, in order for you to follow that path for sure. And interestingly, I mean, with you want to cover a few topics today, which is a little bit about why kind of wanted to cover that in first instance. And we still have this kind of overall theme in our podcast series about understanding how to, or helping really the people that are listening on terms of coaching through crisis. I've always said that coaches have this very unique perspective on how to really take an outward step and help people through what is uncertain, unprecedented times. And even though most of us are out of the lockdown, it certainly seems to be that way. So there's a few topics that you're going to run through us today, and they're all interlinking. So I sort of maybe I'll sort of lead over to you to sort of get us started in terms of, the first topic that you wanted to speak to us about, because I think it obviously still is very much related to this COVID crisis, and how you outlined it was how we went from COVID-19 to co-creating, coexisting, co-evolving. So why don't you elaborate a little bit in terms of what you mean by that, and sort of we can take it from there.
Yes, of course. COVID, I mean, it has been an impact on our world, on our existence. We see it, of course, as a threat to our survival, in some shape or form. And that has, in a lot of ways, woken us up to the power of being able to do things differently, and to have the openness to create together, co-creation. Okay, what does that actually mean? It means we found ways to come together more online, of course, because of COVID and the restrictions of movement, and really to exchange over different platforms to create things together, to also coexist, because of course our world is only one world, and we have to now live under the instructions of COVID and how we should live and react and interact with each other on a person-to-person, face-to-face basis, and we've come to terms with that. But we are evolving, we're co-evolving, because we're unsure of how this is going to pan out. We don't know. Nobody really knows. And so we are kind of finding our way together, slowly but surely, in that. And that's how humans have always been. We've been evolving for millions of years, yeah? And really as humans, okay, since hundreds of thousands of years, from the Homo sapiens times to now. And we will continue to evolve and co-evolve. Now, COVID has given us the impulse to do things a little bit differently. And that is good. That is really good, because we have to find this balance between our coexisting in our world as a planet and the sustainability of that, and us as humans as part of the co-inhabitants of this planet.
Right. And do you think then, I mean, what would be the last thing? I mean, you're right, because I definitely feel that the interconnectedness we all had, but we never really kind of appreciated before. And I think, not to get political, but obviously there was a rise in populist movements, etc. And it felt like COVID really put those things into perspective. So, I mean, in the context, I mean, you're a global citizen as well. You're Irish. You've lived in Germany for 25 plus years. What do you, I mean, culturally, do you see there also being a shift in terms of how we see this interconnectedness, not just, for example, in the EU, but even how organizations themselves are interconnected in terms of trade, for example? Like, you know, do you see that impact, or how do you see that evolving in the next months?
Yeah, no, it will evolve, and we're not there yet.
Yeah,
we're only at the very start, because of course we've lived within a system, within a, let's say, even cultural system or a country system for so long, that we're so used to doing it in this way. Now, of course, we reach over different boundaries, which are the key word here, the boundaries, but these boundaries are starting to move away as we come together in a collaboration, in a platform online, a lot of it. And online is global. It's one world. Yeah. It's there's no countries, there's no boundaries. Yeah. Like before, or even in our minds. And that's part of where we have to start to adjust our mindset a little bit. It's about thinking one, and not thinking just, oh, well, I am from Ireland, or I am, and he is from Germany, and okay, we have different perspectives. No, we are one. We are one human race, of course, belonged on the planet. And this way of thinking is starting to break through. And this is good, because it will allow us to work as one. Now we live in, let's say, political, economic, monetary systems which create a certain behavior, of course, which keeps this oneness a little bit apart. But people are, say, let's call it fighting the system, or at least saying, well, we need to maybe think about how to do this a little bit differently if we want to ensure that we can work together like this, because it's incredibly creative and collective, and it's good for our universe. So let's do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know in the context of that, there's a particular a structure. I think these kind of 10 C's of change, particularly directed at leaders. I mean, we're a leadership search firm, and I think obviously we're hoping that the value of this is also to really help those in leadership positions, especially those that are influencing others, to help them through that. So interestingly, you noted down these 10 C's of change. So why don't you take us through essentially what they are, and obviously what are the impact of those especially?
So yeah, like I said, we have these 10 C's. I have 5 on each hand. So we have 5 behaviors, 5 actions. And the behaviors which I'm talking about are being calm, confident, clear, creative, and collective. And so if you think of those dimensions of behaviors, and then you couple them with the actions of being caring, communicating, collaborating, communing, which I mean sort of communicating or communicating community, and change, then you have the 10 C's. Okay. And you say, all right, so how should this work for a leader in crisis? Again, if he has these dimensions of being calm and confident and clear and creative and collective, he needs to think about, how do I communicate these things to my employees, to the people in my company? How do I show that I'm open to new ways of collaborating? Because of COVID, we can't work together physically all the time. We have to be online. That means I too have to be online, but I have to do it in a way that I'm also accessible to the people. Normally I could walk around, see the people in the offices, etc. Now that's not maybe so possible anymore, to reach out to everybody and to be open and available to people. Also, as a leader, how do I show that I really care, that I care about their concerns, what they have in COVID? How do I keep them calm? How do I keep them confident when, you know, there's huge impacts of economics coming to the company? Can we survive? They have also these thoughts. And of course, you know, how do I actually bring them along with the change in a collective way? That is the most critical of all the C's, actually. It's about this idea, yes, we need to change, and I'm the leader of this, and I want to collectively bring you on this journey. That's the key.
Yeah. And look, I think also we deal with a lot of organizations that are going through transformation, because I think typically that's when they might look for somebody like us to support them and bring in new leadership. But typically one of the things that we always look for is that somebody to enact change. I think, you know, you always see that everybody's open to change, but then the willingness is sometimes not there, right? It's actually then actioning it. So especially for leaders, what would you suggest when they're encountering resistance to that change? They might have these characteristics, or they might be enacting that, but what would you suggest when they encounter resistance, particularly in the face of new challenges and new crises that they haven't seen before? What do you suggest then?
Yeah, what I come to is one clear word. It's respect. Respect is the key word. You should respect that resistance. It means something to somebody. Okay, they have maybe some fears, whatever is behind that. Maybe, you know, trying to find out the root cause is also very interesting for leaders. I know it takes time, but I think it's time well invested, because you respect and you really listen to the concerns of those people who are resisting at the moment.
Right.
And if you really understand them and listen to that voice of concern, if we call it like that, then a leader can take that and maybe construe it with those people to see it that it's no longer concern, it's a care, and we will take that as a care, but we will make it something capable in the change.
Right.
It's a dynamic process, and it's messy. It's you know, I mean, leaders sometimes want to have it all nice but it's not. It's chaos. It's creative. And, you know, leaders today have to get used to more of that way of being, that it can take time, and it's chaos. Yeah.
And look, I think we've also talked a lot about, and there's been a lot said on the topics of leaders showing more empathy, particularly in this time. And I think you as an HR professional, you're probably more in tune with how that would work versus kind of a business leader that sometimes might have kind of stronger pressures on KPIs, for et cetera, in that respect. But do you suggest then it's always better to just do and evolve, and it doesn't need to be perfect, essentially, but essentially it's more a case of showing that kind of goodwill, or showing, as you said, maybe that appreciation for people that might be resistant, but then finding ways to just go ahead regardless?
I think it's a combination. I mean, I think everybody realizes the concept of what's in it for me is a very important concept when you try to bring change in an organization. Right. But what's in it for us is also very important, more important than the individual. Right. So yes, as I said to you previously, you know, respect those concerns, and you listen to people and you try to convince them what's in it for them, as in it for me, the person in the individual level. But it's more about what's in it for us. And a leader has to differentiate those two, and ultimately say, okay, this is the way we got to go. We've heard your concerns. We've heard what you want. We also have concerns and issues and wants. Let's bring them together and let's do it together.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. And I think that also brings us nicely into kind of one of the third points, in that, we're now thinking less as individuals, but more as a group, thinking less about the ego, but thinking about more of us as a community, as a tribe, or as part of this global tribe, should we say. So again, that one of the things you noted was people first, ego to planet first, eco. So why don't you take us through and elaborate on that?
Yeah. Okay. So again, what I'm thinking here is, we are as humans quite egoistic, and we like to have things to please ourselves. And we've lived in a world where, yes, we've had things supplied to us because our ego is asking us to have those things. Yeah. In terms of course, basic needs initially, but as we go up Maslow's theory, we're up to self-actualization and enjoying the fruits of things for our ego and our pleasure. But it has a price. Now, our ecosystem, our planet, has now become much more important in this equation, because we realized we as humans are encroaching on our planet a little bit, and we need to have a better balance. So it's about putting, let's say, planet first, as in the ecosystems which allow us to live on this planet, in the focus. That's not saying that humans are not an important dimension of all that. They clearly are, but they shouldn't be the first dimension.
Do you think that's standard? I mean, because I think you're right. All of us know the word sustainability, but and again, there's certain green shoots of positive activity, particularly in kind of more kind of Europe, the US to some extent. But do you think that's uniform globally? I mean, you're a global citizen. You've worked across the media, across the US. Do you think the concept and the importance of sustainability and how we're just, and now how we are, as you say, moving from this what's in it for me to what's in it for us, do you think that's a concept that you think is going to be uniform in terms of global perspective on things? You see it that way?
Yeah, again, we're in a challenging position to balance, of course, the needs of our human race to survive, and the balance of the needs of our planet to survive. Yeah, it starts actually in our heads of having a mindset about what is really what matters in life, and our expectations of how we live. Now, we've maybe created a form of living which was beyond our basic needs, way beyond our basic needs, which have impacted our planet. Now, we know that. Lots of people know that. Now, there's, of course, a huge population that they're just living at basic needs. So that's okay. We need to sustain them. And I think the equation is, what are we sustaining? Well, we want to sustain our planet and our human race. And that has to be more of the focus, from a political point of view, from an economical point of view, in terms of the system we have. And of course, our system in itself, the system of, let's say, commerce and finance, makes a big impact on that. So maybe we have to think about ways to tweak that as well, in terms of what are we wanting to generate? Is it all just about wealth? No, it needs to be something else. Now, what that something else is up for grabs and up for discussion. I think people have lots of different ideas. I've talked to many people over COVID where they talk about, when we give services for something to another human, do we need money? No, we need maybe an exchange of time or something else. So there's ways that we can maybe, let's say, co-create a different system of value as we move forward. And look, even companies need to think about this. They need to think about, okay, maybe it's not just about creating money and wealth for our shareholders and for whoever we need to make wealth for.
And do you think that comes more, I mean, do you think that's better driven by the private industry or also by leaders in government and public sector for you? It's a community. We're back to this word community, and it's about really bringing people together.
I mean, we talk about the word politics, and politics is a terrible word because people don't really know what it means. It actually means is a forum of bringing a group of people together to make decisions. That's what politics means. Yeah, I mean, that's the definition, but people think it's something else. It's actually, politics is for the people. It's ours. Now, okay, we have created governments and politicians who we give the power to make those decisions, but there are decisions as a people. So maybe again, we have to take more interest, which we do, particularly now because of COVID, to be part of those decisions. And maybe there's other platforms how we can get more involved, to be involved with those decisions for our planet and how we live.
Yeah, I mean, again, hopefully that is going to be a positive, lasting impact of everything that's happened. And I think you do see. I mean, I said there's things like donut economies, or that the theory of it now being done in the Netherlands, where you're no longer judging economic output in terms of its monetary value, but how much it contributes to society. The net positive outcome on society rather than just monetary. You're seeing shareholders also demand that a company performance is not judged just on how much the share price goes up, but in terms of, again, also the net positive impact on society. But that's a huge change, I would say. I mean, are you optimistic about that? I mean, because again, personally, I see a lot of industries, and again, you do see very good examples of it, but of it being widespread. And do you think that the impact of COVID will really have this lasting effect? Do you think, or what can leaders do to ensure that it has a lasting effect? Is probably a better question.
Yeah, no, of course, you're asking the ultimate optimist here.
Yeah.
And I would say I always think pink. I mean, yes, it is a major challenge to get momentum behind this, okay? Right. Because it means a paradigm shift of change for so many people, yeah? And I don't think many people have ever really thought about that, and really they would want that change, really, really. And I suppose for leaders of all different levels, particularly business or even political leaders, they too have to ask themselves, what do I want for a future world, for our future generations? Well, everybody talks about we want to have a world for our future generations. Well, okay, what do we need to do to make that happen? And it really means about collective, chaotic co-creation of a new way of doing things. And this is a challenge. This is about education, of course. Now, I use that word education in very small terms, in not the classical education. I'm talking about education of a human and the development of a human. We need to start, of course, clearly with young people and how they think about the world they come to live in. And education forms a big part of that. So it really is a multi-complex, interdisciplinary, let's say, challenge to bring these things together. But we have to rely on our leaders, and we have to help them. People like you, like me, who are coaches, who have certain mindsets and certain things and experiences. We don't know all the answers either, but we should be challenging our leaders who we're coaching. Corporate leaders, people who I coach, I challenge them on some of these items, because they also have to have that perspective, because they're maybe too focused in their company. And again, you see this and you need to do this. Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think that's very important.
And look, I wasn't putting you on a spot to find a solution to that right now, but I think you're right. You put your own grain of sand into it, and then hopefully that you pay it forward in that respect. And interestingly, you go back to the human element, and I know obviously that's really how you also differentiate yourself as a coach, how passionate you are about understanding human relationships, and how how to really optimize them for professionally, personal. And again, the next one on the kind of topics was really you called it the mushy side of things, but one that is very important, And again, a
Yes.
core part of who we are as humans, you know,
Yes.
what differentiates us is that emotional side, and it's one we count on more to make decisions rather than our rational one. So tell
Indeed.
us a little bit again also about how that emotional
Yes.
side of ours, why it's so important, how has the things developed since we've gone through this crisis, and again, from your perspective as a coach, what can we learn from it, especially for leaders?
Yeah, no, when I talk about the mushy side of us as humans, I have another five fingers. And L, I talk about learn, love, live, laugh, let go. And what I'm talking about here is the dimension of being. When we think about, I call it as an intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, and let's call it spiritual intelligence, or this intuitive intelligence that we have as humans. Yeah. And this is this kind of way of being, what's very important for us as we live and work and play in our world. Okay, so you take those dimensions of the 5L, which I talked about, learning, how we learn as humans, is developing. Yeah, you see even today, technology is forming a much more huge part in how we learn. Okay, and it's really important that leaders think about that. In what ways can we learn differently within our organizations? For example, augmented reality, virtual reality, serious gaming, all these instruments that are coming to help us learn in a different way. We need to embrace this technology. It's a great way of learning. I don't know if you've worn any of these goggles and you've actually experienced something like this. It's phenomenal. You're in a different world. You're actually learning in a safe environment because nothing can happen to you, but you feel like you're in it. So, and they say, crisis managers say, if you've learned something in a crisis, then you will be able to redo it again quickly if you experience that again. That's how we as humans learn. Yeah. So a lot of my challenge for companies as well, in terms of how do we crisis management better in the future, is we need to make our people capable, and that's true learning. And so we need to think about what instruments of technology would we like to use to make our people capable,
right,
to really be calm and confident in the next crisis and clear what we're going to do,
right,
because we've lived it already. And so we're not so, incapable. Yeah. And that's a very important part of like the L of, embracing learning. Now, of course, loving. Yeah. And when I mean loving, of course, there's a human dimension of emotionality with people. That's also very important as humans. And again, you can learn new ways of being more emotional with another human being. Yeah. And leaders, again, it's mushy, but it's thinking about how is the dimension of humans to get people to be emotionally connected, particularly in times when people are offline, online, they're not in the company together. What are we going to do? Yeah, to keep people emotionally connected. Also, that feeling of team. Yeah, how do we feel emotionally connected in a team? It's this feeling of being alive, and that's the third. Living, to feel living, and that's a mix of, again, having reality, virtual reality, and real reality. Face-to-face, person-to-person events, even as we are probably going to have more crises and more shutdowns. Yeah, how are we going to do this? Laughing. What I mean by that is, how are we going to have fun? How are we going to continue to enjoy each other's company, make things enjoyable as we learn together, as we work together, as we live together in organizations. And finally, letting go, which is a very challenging one for most of us as humans. It's building that capability of being able to say, okay, we had these ways of doing things in the past. We got to let go of them. Yes, we learned from them, but let them go. and this is a very big challenge for humans, because we tend to build up this emotional baggage as well, and feel comfortable with the way we were in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting how you linked, like, again, the rise and how technology innovation is helping us learn. But I would also, I mean, you also hear the counter arguments that, firstly, we've had digital adoption completely skyrocket since this crisis, right? So things that weren't online, people that weren't adopting, or organizations have just completely fast forward 5 years in their digital adoption, not just organizations, but people as well, right? And some would say that is actually causes more of a divorce between some of the aspects that you noted there, in terms of learning, in terms of laughing, in terms of loving, and all those kind of human connections is now divorced because of this technology, and because of the rise of our dependence on it. So what would you say to that argument then? I mean, it seems counter to maybe what you noted there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting how you use the word divorce, because that's a really strong word.
Yeah.
You know, it's like nearly a cut.
Yeah.
I would tend to say we've lived more of a separation.
Okay.
It's been a separate. Okay. It's like, you know, we have now, because of the COVID impact of not being offline all the time, and now we're more online, we're separating ourselves. And of course, that makes it much more of a challenge to have what I call the human touch ability. But you will be probably amazed to hear that they are developing tools, virtual augmented reality tools, to have people to have this touch sensation, even if they're online.
Wow.
So, okay, this is, of course, music in the future. But it is coming, and that dimension of reducing this, let's say, online divorce, as you call it, from the humanness of having humanness, is coming online through this capability to have this feeling of being actually in a virtual world that feels real. Okay, so that's, of course, one part, and I would say everything in moderation, otherwise it could be dangerous for the way of our existence. The other is we have to get over the fear of having human contact and touch and contact. That is so important. I mean, we live in a world that is not a world without risk. It is there. It is capable that we will die any day. We all know this. We all know about our say end. We all know we have a limited period of time on this earth. Now, we cannot control all the dimensions to making that perfect. It's impossible. Even for COVID and for all these things, we hope for a cure of some form, or a careness of an injection, or whatever it is, to make it more capable to move around and to meet face to face. But it is important that we say we will make this possible. As companies, we have to make it possible that people have interaction on that human dimension level. We cannot not have it. If we do not, it will lead to very many mental health issues. I guarantee you that. It is not healthy for humans not to have human touch contact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was giving you, I mean, I'm a big proponent of technology, but, you know, I also wanted to get your take on that counter argument, because it is one that people make. But I think I do agree that, you know, if it wasn't for, I mean, a video conference, I mean, look at how Zoom has completely, you know, not only for professional relationships, but personal relationships, how you're able to connect with your family. I mean, we video interview candidates even before, because we know it adds so much more than a phone call. And of course, it's never going to recreate meeting somebody face to face, but you can definitely get a sense of a person. You know, us both sitting here, you get a sense of who I am and a sense of who you are just by sitting in front of a computer. And that's also unprecedented. And I think if that crisis would have happened, you know, even 20 years ago, I think it would have been much more difficult, and it would have completely decimated a lot more than what it did if it would have just gone on. So I completely agree with that. And I think, coming back to that, I mean, in one of the final points, and I think it's a great way to sort of wrap it up, but I think bring everything together, is how you really talk to us about the essence of being human and the power of togetherness that regardless of the technology. That is also you know, been a clear point and a clear aspect that you also wanted to outline. So why don't you also tell us about that?
Yeah. What is the essence of being human? The essence of being human is that we are not perfect. We are all capable of making mistakes. We all don't know everything. And we're vulnerable. Yeah. Now, people have generally a fear maybe to show that. Yeah. Particularly a leader, you know, because maybe he has an expectation of himself. Oh, I have to show I am always in control and I'm always this. There should be no always. There is no always. It's a terrible word, always. Yeah. Or never. Yeah. Those two words, abolish them. We are who we are. You know, leaders need to be authentic. They need to be who they are, not some vision of what people expect them to be. It really is important. Yeah. As a leader, your main capability is your collective capability to bring people together and to make them passionate about a common purpose. That is the essence of being a perfect leader. The essence of being a human is that you say, I don't have all the answers. You know, help me here, guys. We're in this together. And, you know, I have a motto. It's my firm motto since 6 years for Keating Relations. Better together, together better. It sums it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I think it's been really insightful, Michael. I mean, we've gone from the philosophical to the political, but some really good advice for leaders in between. And, you know, I certainly would want to take your advice. I think it's much better always being an optimist in terms of what we're all facing now. I think you're seeing how it helps just overall people rebound, and I think take this as an opportunity to sort of better our communities, our families, our companies, our countries, and kind of the world overall. So I really appreciate your time, and thanks again for being on the show.